October 24th, 1929. A Thursday. The sun rose over New York City just like any other autumn morning. The coffee was hot. The newspapers spoke of permanent prosperity. The jazz was loud, and the champagne was cold. In the marble halls of Wall Street, men in expensive suits congratulated each other on mastering the universe. They believed they had defeated the business cycle. They believed the party would never end. By noon, the ticker tape couldn't keep up. By 2 p.m., the panic had set in. By sunset, the modern world had shattered. But here is the terrifying truth that history books gloss over. The crash didn't happen because of a bad day of trading. It didn't happen because of a single piece of bad news. The crash happened because the mathematical architecture of the system had rotted from the inside out, silently, for decades. And the most dangerous part? Nobody saw it until the floor fell out. Now, look at your screen. Look at the charts. Look at the debt. We are standing on the precipice of a moment that will make 1929 look like a mild correction. This isn't fear-mongering. This isn't conspiracy. This is arithmetic. We are trapped in a cycle as old as civilization itself, a hidden mechanism that governs the rise and fall of empires. It happens every 80 years, a human lifetime, long enough for the last generation who remembers the pain to die out, leaving the new generation to repeat the same catastrophic mistakes. 1781, 1860, 1945, and now, the clock hands are converging on 2026. The alarms are screaming, but the pilots of our economy are wearing blindfolds. They tell you inflation is under control. They tell you the labor market is strong. They tell you a soft landing is possible. They are lying, not because they are evil, but because they are trapped in the same burning building as you. And panic is the only thing they fear more than the fire. Today, we are going to dissect the anatomy of the coming collapse. We will expose the 80-year empire cycle, explain why the next 2 years represent a mathematical singularity for the global economy, and why, for the first time in history, there is no safety net left to catch us. To understand where we are going, we have to understand the nature of the beast. An economy is not a straight line. It is a heartbeat. And like a heart, it has a rhythm. Historians call it the seculum, 80 to 100 years. It consists of 4 turnings. The first turning is a high, a period of rebuilding and institutional strength, like the post-World War II era. The second turning is an awakening, a spiritual upheaval and rebellion against the order, like the 1960s and 70s. The third turning is an unraveling. Institutions weaken, individualism rises, and cynicism becomes the dominant religion. That was the 1990s and 2000s. And then, inevitably, comes the fourth turning, the crisis, an era of destruction and rebirth. This is where the debt is purged. This is where the old order dies. This is where we are right now. Think about the American timeline. 80 years ago, 1945, the world emerged from the ashes of the Great War and the Great Depression. A new financial order was built at Bretton Woods. The dollar became king. 80 years before that, 1865, the Civil War ended, reconstructing a fractured nation. 80 years before that, 1783, the Revolutionary War concluded. Do you see the pattern? Every 8 decades, the pressure cooker explodes. The accumulated debt, the social friction, and the institutional decay reach a critical mass that cannot be solved by voting, or by policy tweaks, or by printing money. It can only be solved by a structural reset. But why is 2026 the specific target? Why not 10 years from now? Because of the debt supercycle. In 1929, the United States was a creditor nation. We owned the world's debt. The government balance sheet was pristine. When the private sector collapsed, the government had the capacity, eventually, to step in. Today, the situation is inverted. The government is the bubble. The U.S. federal debt is accelerating at a pace that defies comprehension, adding trillions every few months. We are paying more in interest on our debt than we spend on defense. We are borrowing money just to pay the interest on the money we borrowed before. This is what economists call a debt spiral. It is the terminal phase of a currency's lifespan. In the 1920s, the excess was in the stock market. Today, the excess is everywhere. It is in the bond market, the housing market, the derivatives market, and the currency itself. The everything bubble. And the pin that bursts this bubble is not a random event. It is a mathematical certainty embedded in the bond market. Throughout 2024 and 2025, a massive wall of sovereign debt is maturing. This debt must be refinanced, but it was borrowed when interest rates were near zero. Now, it must be rolled over at 4, 5, or 6%. This is the kinetic energy of the crash. As this debt rolls over, the cost of servicing it will consume the entire federal budget. There will be no money left for the military, for Social Security, for infrastructure. The only option left for the Federal Reserve and the Treasury will be to print the difference, to monetize the debt. This is where the comparison to 1929 fails, and where the comparison to the Weimar Republic or late-stage Rome begins. In 1929, prices collapsed. It was a deflationary depression. Cash was king. If you had dollars under your mattress, you became rich because everything got cheaper. In 2026, the crash will likely look different. It will be an inflationary depression, a stagflationary nightmare on a global scale, because the system cannot allow deflation. Deflation means the government goes bankrupt. So they will choose the other poison. They will dilute the currency to oblivion to keep the nominal numbers up. The stock market might even go up in nominal terms, but the purchasing power of your portfolio will vanish. You will be a millionaire on paper and a pauper at the grocery store. This is the mechanism of the trap. It tricks you into thinking you are safe because the line on the screen is green, while the ground beneath your feet is turning to liquid. Let's look at the psychology of the 80-year cycle. It's driven by memory. The generation that fought World War II and survived the Depression understood the value of savings. They feared debt. They built robust institutions because they knew how easily chaos could reign. But that generation is gone. We are now led by a generation that has only known cheap money, financial bailouts, and peace. They believe that risk has been abolished. They believe that the central bank is a god that can control the weather. This hubris is the classic signal of the end of a cycle. When the elites believe they are immune to the laws of economics, the hammer is about to fall. We see the cracks forming already. The social contract is breaking. In every fourth turning, the wealth gap becomes unsustainable. In 1929, the top 0.1% owned a massive share of the wealth. We have surpassed those levels today. This breeds populism. It breeds anger. It breeds a rejection of the experts. Look around you. The polarization in politics isn't just about culture. It's about the subconscious realization that the pie is shrinking. When the economy grows, people can cooperate. When the economy contracts and the currency debases, it becomes a zero-sum game. Neighbor turns against neighbor. This is why geopolitical tensions are spiking. War is often the external manifestation of internal economic failure. As the empire cycle concludes, the hegemon, the United States, finds its authority challenged. The BRICS nations, the move away from the dollar, the conflicts in Europe and the Middle East, these are not isolated events. They are symptoms of a weakening immune system. The global sharks smell blood in the water. They know the U.S. Treasury is tapped out. So, walk with me through the scenario of 2026. The yield curve has been inverted for longer than at any point in history. The lag effect of monetary tightening hits the system with full force. Commercial real estate, hollowed out by remote work and high rates, begins to default in waves, taking regional banks with it. The Federal Reserve tries to pivot, cutting rates to stop the bleeding. But this time, the inflation dragon isn't dead. Cutting rates spikes commodity prices. Oil surges. Food surges. The bond market revolts. Investors stop buying long-term treasury bonds because they know they are being paid back in funny money. Yields spike out of control. The central bank is forced to buy everything. Yield curve control. They cap the rates by printing trillions. The dollar index cracks. The illusion of stability evaporates. This is the moment of maximum danger. In 1929, you could trust the bank until you couldn't. Today, with the interconnectedness of the digital financial system, a run on the bank happens in milliseconds. It's not a line of people around the block. It's $1 billion moving out of an app in 10 seconds. The velocity of panic has increased. And the safeguards? The FDIC? It has less than 2% of the deposits it insures. It is a fig leaf, a psychological comfort blanket with no mathematical reality behind it. If 2 or 3 major institutions fail, the insurance fund is insolvent. The only backstop is the printing press. And that leads us back to the currency. The tragedy of the 80-year cycle is that it is self-reinforcing. To fix the problems of the third turning, we applied short-term patches that made the fourth turning inevitable. We used debt to pull demand forward. We borrowed from our children's future to fund our present comfort. Now, the future has arrived, and the bill collector is at the door. The standard of living for the average person is plummeting, masked only by debt. You own less, you own more. The American dream of a house, a car, and a single income supporting a family is a relic of the first turning. It is a mathematical impossibility in the late stages of the fourth turning. But here's the twist. This darkness is necessary. It is the forest fire that burns away the deadwood. The crash of 1929 and the subsequent crisis paved the way for the boom of the 1950s. The crisis of 2026 will eventually pave the way for a new order. But the transition will be brutal. The wealth transfer that is coming will be the largest in human history. It will move from those who hold paper assets, bonds, currencies, unbacked promises, to those who hold real assets, productive land, commodities, energy, gold, Bitcoin, technology that increases efficiency. The cycle destroys the parasites and rewards the producers, eventually. But in the chaos of the transition, the innocent get slaughtered alongside the guilty. Most people watching this are operating under the normalcy bias. It's the psychological state where people believe things will continue as they always have because they can imagine a disruption. They think 2026 will be just like 2019, but with better iPhones. They are wrong. You are watching the end of an era. The era of the omnipotent central bank is over. The era of the unipolar geopolitical order is over. The era of limitless cheap energy is over. We are entering a period of scarcity, of hard borders, and of hard money. The empire cycle shows us that the decline is usually gradual, then sudden. We are in the gradual phase right now, accelerating toward the sudden. The cracks in the dam are spraying water. The elites are moving their capital. They are buying bunkers, buying farmland, buying second passports. They read the same history books. They see the same cycle. They know that when the music stops this time, there won't be enough chairs for everyone. So what is the takeaway? Do you sit in a corner and wait for the sky to fall? No, that is the victim's mindset. The fourth turning is a time of danger, yes, but it is also a time of opportunity. Fortunes are made in times of chaos. The volatility that destroys the unprepared is the same energy that lifts the prepared. The first step is acknowledging the cycle. Stop listening to the noise of the daily news cycle and look at the macro tide. The tide is going out. You must become your own central bank. You must eliminate counterparty risk. If your wealth relies on the promise of a politician or the solvency of a bank, you do not own it. You are merely renting it. In a world of currency debasement, the only hedge is scarcity. You need to learn skills that are recession-proof. You need to build networks of real people, not just digital avatars. The community is the ultimate asset in a crisis. The year 2026 is a marker in the sand. It represents the convergence of the debt cycle, the social cycle, and the geopolitical cycle. It will be a year of reckoning. The financial noir isn't just an aesthetic. It's the reality of a world where the lights are dimming. But remember this, the night is darkest just before the dawn. The empire cycle doesn't end in extinction. It ends in regeneration. The system will break, and a new system will be born from its wreckage. The only question is, where will you be standing when the dust settles? Will you be one of the millions clutching worthless paper and asking what happened? Or will you be one of the few who saw the storm on the horizon, braced for impact, and positioned themselves to build the new world? The clock is ticking. The cycle is turning. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And the next verse is about to begin. Don't blink. Let's dig deeper into the mechanics of this transition, because the devil is in the details, and the details are terrifying. We need to talk about the zombie economy. Since 2008, we have created a corporate graveyard of companies that only exist because interest rates were effectively zero. They don't make profit. They just borrow new money to pay off old money. They employ millions of people. In 2026, as that wall of maturity hits, these companies will face a binary choice: refinance at triple the cost or liquidate. They will liquidate. This is the unemployment shock. And unlike 1929, when people could return to family farms, today's workforce is specialized, urbanized, and heavily leveraged. When the paycheck stops, the credit card default follows within 30 days. The car repossession follows within 60. The foreclosure follows within 90. It is a domino effect that moves at the speed of an algorithm. But the domestic fire is only half the story. Look east. The 80-year cycle isn't just about American internal decay. It is about the rotation of global power. The British Empire crumbled financially after World War I, handing the baton to the US. Now, the US dollar's exorbitant privilege is under siege. For 50 years, we exported our inflation to the world. We printed dollars, bought real goods from China and energy from the Middle East, and they took those dollars and bought our debt. It was a beautiful scam, but the scam is over. The petrodollar deal, security for oil, is dead. When nations stop buying US treasuries, the yield on our debt spikes. The Federal Reserve loses control of the long end of the curve. This imports inflation back to the American middle class with a vengeance. The cost of your morning coffee isn't just about beans and shipping. It's about the geopolitical premium of a dying empire. And how do governments respond to a dying currency? This is the darkest chapter of the financial noir. They don't fix the debt. They fix the user. Watch closely for the rollout of CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. They will sell it to you as convenience. They will sell it as safety during the banking crisis of 2026. Don't worry, they will say. Your bank failed, but you can open a direct account with the Federal. It sounds like a lifeline. It is actually a digital cage. Programmable money allows the issuer to control not just the supply, but the velocity. Negative interest rates. Expiry dates on your cash. Restrictions on what you can buy and where. In the fourth turning, the state seeks total preservation of itself at the expense of the individual liberty. The crash provides the perfect pretext for the implementation of this digital panopticon. It is the ultimate tool to prevent a bank run. You can't withdraw your money if your money doesn't physically exist. This brings us to the great filter. The period between 2026 and 2030 will act as a filter for wealth. The middle class, holding cash and bonds, will be evaporated by inflation. The speculative class, holding meme stocks and unproven tech with no cash flow, will be evaporated by the liquidity crunch. The only survivors will be those holding hard assets and sovereign equity. What is a hard asset? It is something that cannot be printed. An acre of soil, a barrel of oil, an ounce of gold, a Bitcoin private key. These are assets that have no counterparty risk. They do not rely on a CEO, a central banker, or a politician to maintain their value. They are the anchors in the storm. You have to understand the psychology of this smart money. While the media tells you to buy the dip in the S&P 500, the insiders, the CEOs, the politicians, the hedge fund managers are selling at record paces. They are building compounds in New Zealand. They are acquiring second passports. They are diversifying into commodities. They are not listening to the news. They are making the news. They know the math doesn't work. They know that a debt-to-GDP ratio of 130% is a point of no return. They are positioning themselves for the reset. The question is, why aren't you? The tragedy of the average investor is that they drive looking in the rearview mirror. They invest based on what worked in the last decade. But the cycle has turned. The strategy of 60-40, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, is a suicide pact in an inflationary depression. Bonds are certificates of confiscation. Stocks are claims on earnings that are about to plummet. You need to pivot to a wartime portfolio. This means defense first. It means liquidity in assets that are liquid globally, not just locally. It means education. The most valuable asset in a depression is a skill that is in high demand. Can you fix things? Can you grow things? Can you solve complex problems? Or is your job an email job that can be replaced by AI or outsourced to a cheaper jurisdiction? The economic Darwinism of the late 2020s will be ruthless. But let's zoom out. Let's look at the horizon. Why is this cycle necessary? Because systems need entropy to evolve. The forest fire burns the brush to let the sunlight hit the soil. The crash of 2026, painful as it will be, is the clearing mechanism. It will wipe out the zombie companies. It will deflate the housing bubble, making homes affordable for the next generation eventually. It will force a return to sound money, because fiat will have destroyed itself. It will shatter the illusion that we can print prosperity. The survivors of this era will build the foundation of the next 80-year high. The Gen Z and Alpha generations, hardened by this crisis, will become the builders, just like the greatest generation was hardened by the 1930s. So, where does this leave you? Sitting there, watching this video? It leaves you with a choice. You can dismiss this as doom scrolling. You can close the tab, go back to your daily routine, and hope that the people in charge have a plan. That is the path of least resistance. It is also the path of maximum risk. Or, you can accept the gravity of the historical moment. You can accept that winter is coming. You can start preparing today, not out of fear, but out of strategy. Reduce your debt, harden your assets, sharpen your mind, build your tribe. The sun will rise in 2027. The world will still turn, but the hierarchy of power and wealth will be reshuffled. The names on the buildings will change. The currency in your wallet might change. The empire cycle waits for no one. It is a relentless, grinding wheel of history. You cannot stop it. You cannot pause it. You can only position yourself so that when the wheel turns, you are not crushed beneath it, but lifted by it. The year 1929 was a warning. The year 2008 was a rehearsal. The year 2026 is the main event. The indicators are flashing red. The alarms are ringing. The theater is on fire, but the exits are still open.